Well, a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the latest edition of QTalks, the online on-demand series of conversations all around the future of water powered by KTM. My name is Tom Freyberg. I'm an environmental journalist and content creator specializing in water, and I will be your host for the next 25 minutes. So today's QTalks is a special edition. We are talking about 2024 predictions and a look at the year ahead. Now, one thing is for certain. Predictable is becoming the unpredictable, and what was once a stable operating environment for water companies has become perhaps a bit of a less forgiving climate. And from climate change to aging workforces, from the promise of AI through to heightened media scrutiny, water companies face an abundance of challenges. But today is about hope and optimism, because we have three amazing panelists who are going to look into their crystal balls and each give three predictions for the year ahead. And in fact, what I want everyone to do is to rewatch these throughout the year and come back to us, in fact, whether our panelists were accurate. So let me introduce our three panelists. We have Professor Dragan Savic, the CEO of KWR Water Research Institute. We have Professor Newsha Ajami, the Chief Strategy Officer for Berkeley Lab. And last but no means least, we have Gigi Karmous-Edwards, who is the CEO of Karmous-Edwards Consulting. So Dragan, Newsha and Gigi, welcome, and welcome back once again to QTalks. Very much looking forward to getting your thoughts on these predictions. So one of the perhaps biggest topics from 2023, and you can barely open a newspaper or go online without hearing around ChatGPT and AI, is that very topic, artificial intelligence. So let's kickstart by going to you, Dragan. When it comes to AI and where you think that can perhaps create further breakthroughs in water management, if you will.
Yes, Tom, 2023 brought a real paradigm change in how we view AI in general, because creating social media, creating everything that we used to think a long time or get specialists to do it, now we can do it at our fingertips. So I would say that that growth and that rate of change will also impact water management in 2024. We will start seeing huge benefits of using AI in water management. Managing water loss, managing flooding, managing operations will become much more efficient, and also augment human intelligence that we are currently using quite often in making decisions, in doing what we do in the water sector to provide high quality water to users 24 hours per day, 7 days per week. So this is what will happen in 2024, I believe.
Frame that really positively, Dragan. You say augment knowledge and help to improve decision making. So this is a nice segue, Gigi, in terms of your views and prediction around generative AI. And where you think that's going to perhaps improve things for the water sector.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a good segue. First of all, ChatGPT, like you said, is in the news right now. Everyone is aware of it. But surprisingly, very few water utilities are actually utilizing it or experimenting with it. There are some utilities that feel it's a security risk, so they've kind of banned the use of ChatGPT. However, there are some that have put up guardrails for their employees to use and are experimenting with it. They're finding that all employees of all different levels are very interested in seeing how it can assist them in their jobs. So it goes back to what you and Dragan have been talking about. It's really a human and machine interactions with this generative AI. I think it provides a really big promise. There's a lot of capabilities in these large language models that we've been hearing about, and those capabilities are some of the exact capabilities we've been looking for in the water sector, such as data analytics, data cleansing, data integration. Those are fundamental to some of the other digital technologies. And these generative AI, large language models, could actually be very helpful.
So it's really interesting, Gigi, when you're talking about generative AI, because we've got these large language models, the ability to digest, analyze huge data sets to help inform decisions. But actually, Dragan, we had this amazing conversation a couple of weeks ago around the ability for ChatGPT to feed it a prompt and for it to generate this all singing, amazing presentation, right? So across the different roles of a water workforce, there's going to be improvements to the way people do work.
Absolutely. That paradigm shift that happened in general life when AI is making much easier to do these presentations, reports, searches. Now we are starting to see the impact of that technology and similar AI technologies to everyday management in the water sector, and that augmented intelligence that we have between human and the machine is driving that forward.
It's amazing, as you mentioned, Gigi, how quickly people have kind of accepted and had access to this generative AI, and actually looking at the space of 12 months for 2024, actually where we will see that change. So it's certainly a trend and a prediction that we'll be interested to follow. But Newsha, let's throw to you, less on the AI side, but actually perhaps on the theme of disruption, and that's the continued uptake of distributed and decentralized water solution infrastructure. So where do you think this is going to move within 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I think we see because of the impact of climate change and the challenges that a lot of communities are facing with water scarcity, lots of water, a little water, depending on where you are, the interest in creating these modular solutions as a way of augmenting existing centralized solutions is really picking up. A lot of interest on recycling at different scale, more interest in sort of gray water reuse. And a lot of that is actually enabled by digital solutions, or because we need to monitor the operation of these systems at different scales to be able to operate the system as a whole. So I think that is really, we'll see a lot more interest in that. And a lot of that needs to happen through changing policy and changing the way we require some of these uptakes. So that we see that disruption in a way sort of showing up at the policy level and at sort of the individual and a community level as well, just to make sure that we can address sort of some of the challenges we are facing.
Innovations and policies are needed to sort of drive change at a huge level, right? But if you think about by decentrally recycling grey water, then it reduces water demand. Yeah,
absolutely.
Once you add in those different commercial buildings, individual properties, and suddenly you're reducing demand at quite the scale, right? So,
yeah, I mean, I think one thing I would say is often we don't think about that as a demand management strategy, but actually I hardly believe that this is a demand management strategy, because in a way you are taking people off the centralized grid and making them generate their own water, become prosumers, produce and consume, because nobody can go fully off the grid when they're connected to a centralized system, but it sort of reduces their baseline of how much water they're using. And that's going to impact, again, ultimately how we operate the centralized system, because we have to better understand how these changes are impacting demand and how we need to operate or reoperate our existing pipelines to make sure they're effectively managed.
We saw the change with microgeneration and renewables, and from, as you mentioned, consumers to prosumers. So actually, the sort of water's quite behind in terms of renewables and energy in that point of view, but actually a hugely exciting area. So hopefully within 2024, we can see movements in policy pushes, movement in the companies that are disrupting the change. So yeah, a solid prediction. Thank you. So Dragan, let's come back to you because this actually links in really well as well. And that's, you believe there's going to be more increased competition for water and that will accelerate between municipal, between industrial, between agriculture. Why do you see this?
Well, we see it already happening. And for 2024, I can definitely expect growth in such occurrences because we already had in the Netherlands a situation where a water company declined to provide water to a new commercial venture that was moving into the area. The reason for it is resource scarcity. And you would imagine Netherlands is a wet country, water everywhere. But the reality is that we will get more and more of that where the agriculture competes with domestic supply. Commercial, industrial will also bring additional requirements. And then the question is, do these organizations, utilities, need to provide drinking water quality to industrial processes, or is there another level of quality that they can provide to them? So again, the situation becomes much more complex. And again, we're talking about digital solutions that can ease the pressure on how are these managed. I mean, Newsha was talking about centralized, decentralized, but even with decentralized, the utility will have to supply, to have the capacity to supply the peak demand if something goes wrong with the decentralized. So complexity is becoming higher and higher. So we need to come up with better and better solutions for the management, both of the centralized and decentralized system.
That's a great point, Dragan. I think the headline case you mentioned in the Netherlands is a good example, and actually that may well put increased pressure on businesses to then have a forward-thinking water strategy to show that they are going to reduce their water footprint and they are going to recycle on site so that they can then work in harmony with the water utility as well. So yeah, great prediction there. Let's segue then to Gigi, because you see more collaboration in the water sector as a prediction, right? It's particularly when it comes to data sharing and best practice as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing an increase in that where like there's some group in California that are sharing more data, anonymized data, of course, but how can we all benefit from the shared amount of data across the different utilities? We're seeing something take place in the UK as well in terms of sharing AMI data and other data points, as well as Australia. So this actually benefits everyone in the water sector. And with some of these tools like generative AI, I think we could create new tools based on massive amounts of data. So if you can imagine collecting AMI data across the globe with metadata associated with it, you can start to imagine training some of these large language models in such a way that they become virtual meters or virtual sensors for some of the less resourced utilities. So the more collaboration, the more sharing, the more equality I think we're going to see across the water sector. And I think that's one of the important challenges we're all trying to meet.
That's another great prediction, Gigi. We had Nigel Watson from the Northumbria Water Group actually on a previous QTalks all around open data and open water, and as a progressive utility, it's really interesting to sort of hear the viewpoint on why they're leading that. So more sharing of data, more collaboration between water utilities. I'd say there's another C word, circularity, that keeps coming up time and time again, and that's impossible to achieve without that collaboration. And Newsha, this is one of your predictions in terms of perhaps seeing more evidence, more case studies of circularity across water for 2024?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes in two waves. One is circularity within the sector, which is sort of what Dragan was also mentioning, and I mentioned earlier as well, which is taking water and using it and reusing it multiple times at different scales. And then the second piece is creating circularity across different sectors. For example, if you're treating wastewater, can some of the product, like what is we called waste, become a resource for someone else, right? sort of creating circularity in that way also makes this process a lot more sustainable. So, for example, some of the Scandinavian countries are using the waste heat from the wastewater treatment plants as a way of heating their homes and communities, right? So it just by itself creates a circular system. On the water sector, I think this circularity, as Dragan mentioned, can create this opportunity to fit for purpose quality, right? So don't treat the water to the highest quality and flush it down the toilet or use it for washing your cars or watering outdoors. You actually have an opportunity to treat water to different kind of qualities depending on need. And that actually can reduce our carbon footprint and make the process of cleanup easier and actually take the pressure off our existing system. I think another piece of this circularity and centralized, decentralized piece is, combining it with AI and digital solutions, is opportunity to communicate and engage customers as part of this process. Right now, they are sort of sitting outside, being provided to, and they really have very limited insight into what happens and how things work. And as we are transitioning to this digital world with a hybrid infrastructure model, which is centralized, decentralized, and all that, utilities need to and have the opportunity to engage more actively with their customers and engage them in the process. So I think all of that sort of can enable us to transition to a world that's a little slightly different from where we are right now. And I'm hoping that can actually enable us to do better as we build future cities or new communities, right? So sort of embed some of these solutions in that process rather than retrofitting what we already have.
Amazing. So using the data to proactively communicate with consumers on the kind of water treatment cycle to sort of evolve beyond the sort of transactional relationship. Very good. So Dragan, your final prediction is around SaaS, so software as a service and cloud computing, where you think that will be one of the main kind of ways that tools will be delivered. So can you explain a bit more about this, please?
Yes, I believe like 10 years ago, we couldn't imagine running a computer tool, a digital tool on our computers without installing it on our computer. But these days, we have more and more like Microsoft 365, cloud computing. So through the web browser, we get access to unimaginable computing power. And this is happening more and more with water management tools. So my prediction for 2024 is that, offerings in this area, so digital tools being offered to utilities, water utilities, will be all as SaaS. They will all have the ability to access all that computational power, all that AI at their fingertips through a web browser, rather than through something that has to be installed on the IT systems and approved and, go through. And through that, you get the best possible cybersecurity protection, because those providers are the whole trust in cloud computing comes from their ability to protect those cloud systems from cyber attacks, which we as individuals, maybe utilities have the ability to do that better than individuals, but still, I think providing that is also an added bonus.
So this is leveling the playing field, regardless of the size or perhaps the financial maturity of a utility, because these tools are available online. Then it's really, there's a lot of talk around the democratization of data, but that really is happening with software as a service, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is also when we are talking about collaboration, when we are talking about integration of data through cloud services, we get much, much more and easier access to it, you get utilities clubbing together around the same challenge. So I have examples of those from Australia, Europe, and other parts of the world having a similar challenge, and they want to share the information together and have access to the same modeling decision support tools. Again, SaaS will help or at least support them in that endeavor.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's some great examples now from UK to Denmark to Australia of these kind of cross-continental collaborations of data sharing. It's really encouraging to see. So Gigi, on the sort of software as a service, one of your sort of final predictions was digital tools available to utilities, but with a sort of significantly reduced pricing. So talk us through that as a prediction for 2024.
Yeah, so far, what you both have been talking about, once you introduced software as a service, it mostly is an operational cost. You can pay on a monthly payment rather than that very high capital payment that you used to have to do for licenses. So that definitely makes it easier for some of the smaller, less resource utilities to start adopting some of the digital technologies. But let's talk a little bit about generative AI, for example. The concept of GPTs. I don't know if all of you have heard about it, but it's so exciting. Now, you don't need to develop software to create a very specific generative, very focused application called a GPT. You now can just use your text, your words. You could even speak it if you want to, but you write the instructions for this very specific GPT in the text, and then it goes off and writes a code to accomplish the objective that you're interested in. And now they're going to start having the concept of a store, where if you are going to write a GPT for the water sector, for example, you could then start offering it in the OpenAI store and allow more and more utilities to access this tool that you've created. Again, not writing software, but through text, through just instructions, which is really amazing. The other thing I wanted to say is, we've always talked about data analytics and how important that is in the water sector. But now with generative AI, you have access to unstructured data. Usually when you talk about data analytics, it's structured data. Now, any PDF, any image, any multimodal input, such as video or speech, can then be used for some of the data analytics. So now you can imagine the type of insights you can start to get, not just from your data, but from unstructured data, which is really fascinating. On top of that, OpenAI at the same time announced the API. Usually you have to pay per token when you use the API to use the large language model, the OpenAI one. They have reduced the pricing by 2.7 times per token. So now if you're developing an application that sits on top or leverages OpenAI's large language model, your cost is going down. So hopefully they can spread it out to the end users of this. And the promise is in the future, prices are going to go lower for generative AI. So that's something that's really exciting, and you can start to see the use of digital technologies even more and hopefully bring equity across a different well-resourced versus low-resourced water utilities.
Thanks, Gigi. So open access, so already written prompts to say, essentially saving more time for people having to repeat those prompts. Very good. Newsha, we're going to talk about money. Final point. Of course, money makes the world go round, as they say. But one of your predictions is the emergence of innovative financing mechanisms to enable the transition of the water sector. So what do you mean by that?
So look, as we're talking about a paradigm shift in the water sector, and obviously when you have a significant paradigm shift, you're not going to be able to use the same tools and financial tools that you had before to move forward. So there is a need to kind of look back and see how this process needs to change. And there are two things into financing. One is the utilities need to rethink their business model. As we are talking about distributed solutions as a demand management tools, to connecting water, wastewater, and stormwater as a sort of circular system, to connecting water sector to energy sector as part of another circularity. All of this has negatives and positives into how much money flows into a utility, right? People use less water, there's less revenue comes in, right? Then utilities have less to play with. But there are opportunities for them to recover costs by reducing their carbon footprint or potentially selling their product to someone else as a resource. So that means that we have to look back, sort of sit back and try to look through this as a system and see where are the positives and negatives and how can we create a financially stable system or financially stable sector as we move forward. With that comes opportunities for different kind of financial tools that are being used as well, right? For example, people using different kinds of, for example, let's talk about sort of distributed solutions. Then individuals or companies are investing in an infrastructure as an on-site reuse or for potentially recycling in different scales. Different people pay for that service, right? So how does that impact utility, and where does that fit into the capital cost versus operational cost? I think the digital solutions, yes, absolutely, as Gigi said, reduces, some of them have a lower capital cost, but a lot of utilities struggle with operational costs regardless. So they have to be a need to reimagine, first of all, bringing the digital tools as part of an infrastructure line item, which is right now it's not. So trying to kind of treat data and data analytics and digital tools as part of the infrastructure improvement or augmentation. Then on top of that, we need to make sure there is enough resources coming in to pay for this operational need. And then on top of that is also, for example, when energy sector transitions, there were a lot of different models that were created on as you save more, you can earn more. As people invest in the distributed solutions, then there's less pressure on the centralized operators to maintain their system. As we sell our resources for other use, there is another revenue stream. So all of this creates a different financial model that we actually have to embrace. And a lot of utilities actually some of them actually are looking back and trying to kind of see in the face of climate change, change in demand, aging infrastructure, and emergence of digital solutions, how do they need to rethink and reimagine their business model and the financial tools they're using?
It links back to the circularity that I think everyone's touched on, right? If there's new products that can be sold to neighboring industries, and that could be a revenue model as well, right? But actually, if you are reducing the demand and use of water, then it means less income. So it's a brave new world with potential new revenue streams. But I think, the way things that have always been done are perhaps not the way things will be done as we move forward. So interesting perspective there on finance. Thank you, Newsha. So there we have it, 9 predictions spanning from AI, generative AI, through to increased competition, increased collaboration, through to increased circular practices, new financial and business models. So quite a lot to digest from our 3 expert speakers. But how did they get on? As I mentioned at the start, come back to this video throughout the year and compare notes, see whether the predictions were accurate, as I truly think they will be. So thanks again for tuning in to this latest edition of QTalks. My name's Tom Freyberg, and make sure to check out the previous editions for all QTalk based content. And good luck for 2024.